happy birthday, Super League. 25 years old today. Can go out and drink in many states in America. I think that's 21 anyway, isn't it? Won't be challenged when it's buying booze in the supermarket or lottery tickets. And he's still going.
Hooray!
I do love that picture of Maurice Lindsay and Marmaninga holding up a big bit of wood at Headingley. That is one of my favourite pictures. With someone knock up a logo, get it up there. And there they were. And now we've got an ace brand and proper branding experts and stuff. And
welcome to Summer Rugby.
Summer Rugby. See,
can I take these off now?
Yeah, for those not watching the podcast, Phil was wearing glasses, but he's not wearing them anymore.
Sunglasses to celebrate the start of Summer Rugby and to make John feel at home because the sun's out.
Sheffield?
No, that's...
Yeah. I've just been looking for a beach for Phil, and unfortunately, I've not found any. So,
isn't that what they've done with the Don Valley Stadium? Just turned into a big beach.
I think it's rubble, a pile of rubble. Adequate for all the brothels and the rest of the things that are inadequate. Never mind.
Yeah, I remember the first time going to Attercliffe because there used to be a shop selling ice hockey stuff there. And it's a very salubrious part of the city of Sheffield. I'm surprised it's not, more patronised by tourists, so to speak. John Davidson is here. I'm still chuckling from your description of Ken Davey on your thing with Steve Mascott on Friday.
I can't remember what it is.
8-year-old failed Tory politician, I believe was your words, John Davidson, of the new man leading this sport into the 22nd century.
I didn't mean to be a offensive term of Ken. I don't know Ken. I've never spoken to him, but I think 79 or 80, and he did run for election for the Tories, and he did lose. So I think facts. But I think it probably wasn't an inspiring appointment, many people would say. But I guess it's only an interim appointment. It'll only be there for 3 months. And he did give out his mobile phone number in his Zoom press conference, which compared with Robert Elston, who was kind of untouchable or unreachable, that's a big change.
We'll talk more about... Oh, go on, sorry, Phil.
As I say, the young face of Super League, near 80-year-old Ken Davey.
Well, we're a very sport. We're a Tory sport these days, aren't we? So we're a conservative sport.
We welcomed Oliver Dowden to do the cup draw and thanked him profusely. Absolutely. We're apolitical.
The new David Mellor. In terms of his job, not he's going to host a phone-in on 5 Live at any point in the future. Before we talk about men in suits and stuff, let's talk about rugby because Super League's back. Well, forget the Challenge Cup was back the week before, like everyone else. There was no Rugby League before that, but Super League is back. We will talk about the Challenge Cup in a bit. Let's go straight in. Who are the big winners and losers of the first weekend of Super League, and what's going wrong? Who's in crisis?
Oh, Warrington.
Warrington in crisis, that's it.
Yeah. I believe Phil Kaplan was writing that yesterday at Headling. I sat next to him. He was it was Ross Heavenstall was sharpening the knife in to see prices back. No, they were quite disappointing, I thought, out of kind of the how many games there was. There were 6 games. They were the most disappointing. And I thought St Helens were very impressive. And probably every other team had, something to cling on to in terms of performance, regardless of result.
The great news is that we have a league table. After one round of matches, the trade press is full of not just rugby, but the table. So read into that what you will. I think John's right. At this stage of the season, it's about impressions, philosophies, work ethic. Everything isn't going to go for you. Some teams are already suffering from injuries. Others are going to have injuries thrust upon them. And virtually everybody, as you say, got something out of it, apart from Warrington, who looked like a disjointed set of individuals. Very talented, very expensive individuals, but compared to the Castleford team they played, who looked like a group that had spent pre-season practicing combinations and getting to know each other. That was the marked difference in that game. But what I would say is I think we had a great first round. I mean, you cannot expect too much. John will confirm that Friday night was a double bath to get your knees moving again. It was cold and inhospitable. And we got drama. We got a bit of a masterclass from St Helens, who didn't really need to get out of second or third gear, but a Salford team that showed a degree of togetherness, bearing in mind they've got so many new players. We nearly had drama with Lee and Wigan, and I think when we look back at the end of the season, that'll go down as perhaps a lost opportunity for Lee. But a couple of Wigan players with very experienced heads got them out the mire. I thought John Bateman, without dominating the game, was absolutely outstanding in the work that he did, and Zach Hardacre just had that little bit of class at the back to get Wigan away from an embarrassing situation. I thought the Leeds and Wakefield game was probably best quality throughout most of the 80 minutes. Saw a fantastic couple of tries from Tom Johnson, who should be the face of the sport. And I'll ask John in a minute about the stats that we need to make somebody like him the prominent profiled player that Ken Davey is desperately screaming for. And again, you know, Leeds look quite impressive in pulling off a come from behind win. And then Hull KR just left themselves too much to do. But again, if you were a fan, you'd be going, didn't give in. You know, showed a lot of willingness and no degree of spirit and togetherness to come back. Catalan did what Catalan do, and that is implode for no reason for 20 minutes, very nearly threw away a game they should have won. And the last game was the most intriguing. We all knew that with the two coaches leaving and John rumouring heavily that one would be taking over from the other at the end of the season, whoever started worse was going to be under undue pressure. And it was just interesting to see the way that they played. And to be honest, Warrington never, ever looked like winning or salvaging that game, which was disappointing for their fans.
Darryl Powell, is he off to Warrington? Let's just go straight in there. And upset everyone at Castleford.
Warrington are denying it. They're denying that they've started interviewing candidates. I mean, there's a lot of rumours flying about. You know, I think when Steve Price announced his decision, which I think is a family decision, he's got two young daughters, and it'll be 4 years in the UK. And obviously with COVID, you can't, go back in the off season, so it makes it harder. The rumour mill was saying that Darryl Powell was going to Cass and Jake Truman was going with him. And obviously, that's been denied. Jake Truman is under contract, but there's also been rumours of a transfer fee, which has also been denied. So that's where it sits, denials. I guess we will find out in the future. But I think, I echo what Phil said. I think Warrington were quite disappointing. I probably missed the first 20 minutes because with the Zoom press conferences that go into the second game, you can't kind of do both. But from what I saw, Castleford was really impressive. Obviously handled the loss of Gareth O'Brien really well. Noel Evans, seems to be a great signing. And they never really looked like losing that game, even though it was close at stages and towards the end. And I thought probably apart from St Helens, the other team that really impressed me was Hull FC. With Jake Connor at the back, Josh Reynolds, it's the double grub combination. And also defensively, I think Huddersfield threw a lot at them. They never really, their defensive spirit and desire was fantastic. So, I think it is round one, but there was a lot to unpack. And I think probably the award for the round goes to Blake Wallace's hair, the best hair we've seen in a long while.
I think the only disappointment for Hull, who were impressive, but let's not forget they were very impressive in round one last year and couldn't keep it going, was probably the last 15 minutes. Why did they go for goal at 20-0 up? It seemed to stop all of their momentum. I get, Brett Hodgson wants them to be ruthless, wants to make sure that clearly they are a very, very difficult and disciplined team to beat. But he almost surrendered the initiative for that last 15 minutes, so, which was still 1-10-0. It didn't matter in the ultimate scheme of things. But I just thought that was slightly disappointing. They played so well. They've got the balance right. Clearly, Connor is a fullback. The halfbacks really worked well together. The forwards looked as though they'd moved away from merely just having big men to having a selection of guys who can do different things. We were saying during the game how impressive Andre Savelio was. Looked, slightly slimmed down and played a lot of minutes and caused no end of trouble. He didn't. His discipline wasn't an issue, which perhaps it has been in the past. They looked like they had the full package, but they never actually rammed it home by going for goal when they didn't need to. It's almost like that's us taking our foot off the pedal. So I think that Brett Hodgson would be a little bit concerned about that. But yeah, they were impressive.
I know we're jumping around, but just to jump back to Cass for a second, we mentioned the fact that they looked like a team who were more cohesive, but they also played that game without Danny Richardson, who of course would have been preparing all pre-season to be alongside Jake Truman.
Yeah, I think he's got a bit of a wrist injury, so that's why he wasn't wrist. But it was Gareth O'Brien in the friendly before Adam Miller was tested. He looked quite good in the halves with Truman, and I think they've got a good spine there. With McShane, with Evalds, with Truman, O'Brien, Richardson. They've got a lot of playmakers, a lot of people, and Matautia, obviously in the centres who can play fullback, has played some six, I think. It's a really attacking team. So it just seemed the two games I've seen at Castleford, obviously the friendly, which you can say that's a separate, but that in round one they look a bit sort of freer mentally. I don't know whether the power decision has taken off some pressure and they can just go out and perform. But I think they'll be very happy with that start. Warrington. I think is it Wakefield? Is it Lee? No, it's Lee. I think they played round two, isn't it? You don't want to say it's a must-win game in round two, but I think they were expected to beat Lee, with all due respect to Lee, even though Lee were impressive on Friday night. And if they don't win that game, you kind of think what's going there. Because I just had a look at what Steve Price said after the game, and he said, we have to be patient. There's been a big change in our team within the preseason, and it wasn't displayed today. That's frustrating. We're all hurting. Defensively, leaking 21 points is not acceptable. But it didn't seem like there was a big change in the team, for me anyway.
There wasn't a big change in personnel, so I assume he's meaning a change in philosophy. But apart from starting Darryl Clark on the bench, that virtually was the team that the spine and the core of the team that they've had over the last few years. I don't know. I think what we're going to need, and it sort of was hinted at it in that Castleford game, is you've got to have versatility among your squad. Paul McShane predominantly was working out a halfback after Gareth O'Brien went off, and was quite clearly the most influential player on the pitch for Castleford. Probably Evalds not far after him. And you've got to have players that can do that. Warrington looked like they were playing quite a lot of one-up rugby. So for all the changes that they've had, it wasn't easy to see. I'm not sure starting Clark off the bench necessarily again would be my choice. I think he's exactly the kind of player you need under these new rules. And you're going to have very, very good quality youngsters. And I think, again, we saw with a couple of the teams that if you've got them and they can step up, that's going to make a massive difference this year. Because you're going to be relying on them, and again, I'm not sure who's best placed, but historically, Wigan and St Helens, Leeds again with that to play a back line with a lot of kids in it. They still got the work done, so yeah, don't read too much into it because it is going to be affected by the number of games and the depth and quality of your squad. But you would want to have at least put in a display that you could build off the back of, and John's probably right. Warrington are probably the only team that maybe didn't. And not only now have they got Lee, but they've got Swinton in the cup. So the next 2 weeks, you would expect them to hit back in big style. And if they don't, then all it does is ratchet up the pressure.
Darryl Clark following Steve Price to Australia as well.
Well, that was the report from Australia. I mean, I think Warrington have denied that Gold Coast have made an offer, but I think he is on a long-term contract, so you would think there would have to be some sort of fee. But look, I think Darryl Clark definitely good enough to play in the NRL, and would have probably no shortage of suitors. You look at how Josh Hodgson's done, and I think Darryl Clark could potentially do similar. So it would certainly be a big blow to Warrington and whoever is coaching Warrington next year if he is to leave at the end of the year. I think he's just had a child recently, so whether the timing is right to move, I don't know. But probably not another thing they need. And also Greg Inglis, I don't think there's going to be any push to rush him back next week or even the week after. They're taking a very cautious approach with him, and I think that's smart because he hasn't played for 2 years. I think people thinking he's going to be the Greg Inglis of 10 years ago is fanciful.
But they need him to perform because their last two signings at centre have not gone particularly well for them.
Yeah, that's true. that's very true. I mean, I think we spoke on Sunday, Phil, whether they need to sort of try and make room for Matty Ashton, because I think he only featured off the bench late, and he's got a bit of X factor about him, and you sort of think it's a team that's lacking a bit of speed. So whether you try and bring him in on the wing or what, I mean, obviously Stephen Rashford's a great player, so it's a tough one there. But I think they do need to mix it up. And I think that Connor Wrench sort of he got targeted a little bit down his edge and found it difficult. So perhaps a surprise that Jake Momo didn't get a start there. Who's obviously got a lot more experience.
I think the other thing we don't know, because we haven't been on the inside of all of the squads, is that their pre-season might have been longer. And I saw, quite a few people saying that should mean that players are fitter and raring to go and have had enough time to gel in combinations. But the word coming out of most squads is they haven't spent a lot of time together, that the COVID restrictions have meant they've been training in groups. Clearly, some clubs haven't been able to train at all because their facilities were shut down. I just think that we can't expect too much of clubs at the beginning of this season, because it is going to take time. We don't know who's fit. When you haven't had a lot of contact for a degree of time, then you get strains and pulls in training when you start doing opposed sessions, and it is going to take a little while for every club to get their first choice players on board and fit and raring to go. And it is going to be a test of every coach to get that balance right between the guys they want out there and the guys they know can't be out there because they're not quite ready to be out there.
At least Greg Inglis was on the telly. So he's here. He exists. He's here. Unlike Wigan, right? Johnny Field's out for 5 months. Harry Smith swears on the telly. That was great. I know people get upset. Sky apologise, but they have to apologise. It's the law. But it's still funny. Where's Jackson Hastings?
Well, I think he's in the squad for next week. He's obviously probably didn't come back in pre-season when first expected, but I don't think he'll be going to the NRL anytime soon, particularly with the Jai Field thing. From what I understand, even though that story came out, there'd been discussions about next year at West Tigers, not this year. So I can't see why they would release him from his contract, particularly when they only made 2 signings in the off-season and one of their playmakers is out for 5 months. So, I think Jackson Hastings will play this week and will play out the rest of the season with Wigan.
He just wants to make his seasonal debut against Wakefield for maximum impact, clearly. I think, actually, if an NRL team came in for any player in Super League at the moment, a small amount of money to offset some of the finances that are precarious after everything that the clubs have been through makes them really vulnerable. So I think that, if Wigan could get a transfer fee for Jackson Hastings, bearing in mind he's only got a year of his contract left, it wouldn't be a huge one to get him to the NRL in the relatively near future if a club desperately felt like they needed him. And there's a couple of clubs that look like they could do with a half-back at the moment. Obviously, there's an injury crisis at the Roosters where he's got a bit of history, and Wests have already said They clearly might like him on there. I think Manly and Canterbury are desperate for some kind of pick-me-up after 3 rounds. You can see that somebody like him would be a target, and I'm not sure our clubs could stand in the way of anybody. We were again on when we'd seen the amazing things that Tom Johnson can do. Saying the one thing that this competition needs is to keep him. You know, and the worry, of course, is that an NRL club sees a finisher of such quality and goes, "Yeah, we'll just sweep him up for what, relatively speaking, is not a huge amount of money." And I think we are vulnerable to a lot of our stars going to the NRL if they were to decide to flex their financial muscle, because we haven't got anything to prevent that at the moment.
Just on that, Phil. I mean, what do you think about Dom Young? Obviously, a 19-year-old winger. I think he played one Super League game for Huddersfield. Couldn't get any regular game time. He goes out to Australia in 3 months. I know they've had a few injuries in their back line, their centre and the 2 fullbacks, but made his debut on the weekend. If you're another English player, you're thinking, well, I can't get a run in Super League, a young player, but I can go to the NRL and play pretty quickly. It's a bit of an odd one.
You've got to be incredibly talented to crack the NRL at the age he has, and so it's
there now. I think 5 as well. You know?
Yeah, so it's a big loss to our game because he clearly had played for England Academy. He looked the part. Now, whether that was Huddersfield being too slow to pitch him into Super League and see the value of him, or whether it's just a very ambitious young kid who's backing himself in the same way that Herbie Farnworth did. It's great for their development as players, and if they can make it at such a young age in the NRL, then absolutely fantastic. I just think at the moment it makes us really, really vulnerable to players being picked off, and it doesn't matter whether it's a Darryl Clark at Warrington or a Jackson Hastings or a Dom Young. You just look at the quality that we are producing. Can we retain it? And again, we talked about it every week, and I think we are on the verge of the new TV deal being announced. Even Ken Davey said it's less. Let's be honest, it's not going to be more. So clubs can only financially plan to the income that's coming in. There's a concern there.
Well, I think the trend noticing this year with the NRL is you look back the last however many years, 8, 9, 10 years, there was a trend to buy players out of their contracts. So Sam Tompkins, Warriors paid a lot of money for him. Canberra paid a lot of money for John Bateman. I'm not sure if they paid money for George Williams, but they lost money obviously when he came back. So now you look this year, you've got Dom Young, Bailey Hodgson, who's the cousin of Josh Hodgson from Castleford, and I think is it Harry Rushton, young Wigan prop. So they're not actually going to buy the established England internationals, established Super League players. They're buying the next generation because they can give them probably twice what they're on in Super League, even though it's a minimum contract, and just put them in reserve grade and they prove themselves. Some will make it, some won't, but they're not spending huge money. So actually, from a Moneyball recruitment point of view, it's quite smart from the Australian clubs, but it could see the next generation of talent, English talent, come through. I think it was George Burgess or Tom Burgess went over without playing a Super League game, and obviously, had a pretty good NRL career. So maybe we'll see a lot more of that.
I think the concern from that point of view, and you're right, although I still think they could cherry pick whoever they wanted, because relatively speaking, our clubs are at a huge financial disadvantage at the moment, is that we are going to see that next generation play more and more Super League this year. I mean, even in round 1, we have seen some young talent come to the fore. I mean, I thought one of the best young players I saw this weekend, Jack Broadbent, was outstanding for Leeds. Well, the more young players we see that prove themselves, the more vulnerable we are to losing those players. And this isn't a doom and gloom scenario. It's just the absolute reality of where we are. And we want these kids to play. It's important that they do. But then we run the risk of putting them in the window and finding that somebody has come in and taken our mannequin.
When's the first Englishman going to play for New South Wales or Queensland then in Origin? Now they're going to change the rules.
Well, I think there was some chat years ago about Sam Burgess. Obviously, he had a coffee in Sydney, which made him eligible. But yeah, and I think apart from the nonsense spouted by Phil Rothfield, I don't think Jason Malolo will play for Queensland. Although quite a few years ago, because I think he moved to Queensland at the age of 12. Mel Meninga did actually ask him when he was Queensland coach, and he said, no, I didn't want to. So considering he's played for New Zealand and Tonga, he might as well play for Queensland, New South Wales, Yorkshire, and France. No.
But there is precedent, isn't there? Because Adrian Lamb played for Queensland.
Tony Carroll.
Yeah, the rules have been changed a lot since then, Phil. They were tightened up, I think it was 4 or 5 years ago. So now, for an example, a player who was, say, born in Sydney and raised in Sydney but has Samoan parents can play for New South Wales, but then can play for Samoa and not Australia. I think is the right way. You shouldn't be punished if you are eligible, but also we need to protect international rugby league as we need to protect the seriousness of Origin if you're an Origin fan. I mean, I'm from New South Wales. I don't want to see someone from Fiji playing. Akila Uarte, for example, never should have played for New South Wales. But anyway, I think we're getting off topic. Yeah.
Well, are we ever on topic? Here's a press release from Super League that's just fired into my inbox. The 2021 Betfred Super League season got off to a record-breaking start, with fans tuning in to watch Catalan Dragons defeat Hull Kingston Rovers, blah, 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 blah. The game recorded the highest match audience for a regular season game in 15 years, and it involves a foreign team. Blah, blah, blah.
But has that got anything to do with crowds not being allowed in and only being able to watch the game on a screen?
I don't know, but brilliantly, it doesn't actually say how many people watched. Not only did the Catalans game drive big numbers, but with all 6 round 1 games being broadcast on Sky Sports, it proved a hit with fans as match audiences over the entire weekend were up 56% on the 2020 average. And it goes on and on and on. But there's no actual numbers in there, just biggest ever and stuff, which...
So the ratings are up. Why are we getting less money?
But, I mean, it's clear that the ratings are going to be... If the ratings hadn't gone up by that amount, bearing in mind that the only way people can watch the game is on Sky, you'd be seriously, seriously worried. I reckon every sports ratings have probably gone up because that's all people can do. So, Great if you're going to announce the TV deal this week, and it's made some difference to the negotiations. I suspect, sadly, it won't.
1 million people watched the snooker the other night on ITV4, but I don't know how many people watch Super League. So, but it's good, it's good, and the numbers apparently have been good for the games the sportsmen were showing in the Challenge Cup, which are free, which is good. But don't take that because people watch something for free that they'll pay for it, because they might not. I will watch Widnes versus Whitehaven for free. Am I going to pay a $5 for it? No. And that's no disrespect to Widnes and Whitehaven. That's just reality.
Well, I said this to someone the other day, Richard. I think I might have said it to Phil, but if you've already, I'll use myself as an example because I know that. You pay for Sky and you pay for the Watch NRL app. So you've effectively paying twice for rugby league games. I mean, are you going to pay a £5? I mean, if you're a Bradford fan, yes, you probably would. But if you're not a Bradford fan, you're just a rugby league fan, are you going to pay when you've got all those other, and you can watch a game on the BBC for free, you can watch games on the Sportsman, and you're already paying twice? I really doubt it. Apart from your hardcore fans of that particular club, obviously.
And whilst I think that there's absolutely no doubt the way they've operated the R-League app, particularly over the last year or so, to get as many matches featured as you can is absolutely incredibly commendable. We did have the ludicrous situation this week where we were competing against ourselves because games were played at the same time. Now, I know it's not easy to coordinate anything. In fact, it's probably damn near impossible. But you would have thought that they would do everything they could to not have Rugby League going up against Rugby League, and I think it might even have been Steve Mascott.
Who was the winner? Rugby League against Rugby League. Who was the winner?
Netball.
Well, was it your good colleague and ours, Mr. Mascott, who wrote? That's one of the reasons why people like Sky, buy the entire rights of a competition so that you can't compete against what they're showing. So they may not show every game, but nobody else can show something at the same time, detract from their offering, and we did have that on Sunday, which I'm sure everybody got what they wanted out of the games that they saw, but you have to be a bit cuter than that if you can.
You have to be, but as you say, it was a tricky weekend, wasn't it? Because obviously the Super League games were already programmed in. It was where you fit the Challenge Cup games in. But could you have played Swinton Oldham at 10 in the morning? Yeah. There's no reason why not. Can't go to the pubs the night before. Could you have played it at 8 o'clock on Sunday night after the Widnes Whitehaven game? Unless you have to pay for floodlights or something. But
I think that's the thing, Rich. If you scheduled one of those games for an evening game after the last Super League game on Sunday, or a Thursday night game, that would have been perfect, because obviously there was no Thursday night game, or a Monday night game perhaps. But when you've got part-time teams, it's it's much harder to organise, isn't it?
I think without crowds in the ground, you do have a bit more flexibility. So we did see a couple of games kicking off at things like 12:30, and players will accommodate when they have to play. So you probably could have played a cup game on Saturday night. There was a slot there, and maybe there was one Sunday early evening as well, because the kickoffs were earlier on Sunday in Super League. But they only had a few days to arrange the cup ties because it was consecutive weeks. So I get how difficult it is, but if you are going to roll it out and get maximum impact, then you really can't have two games on at the same time.
We'll move on to the Cup in a bit. I'm just trying to round up everything else that happened on the pitch in Super League this week. Also, we mentioned St Helens. St Helens fans historically say we don't give them enough credit, because it's hard to just say every week, Saints were really good again, but Saints were really good against Salford. Tommy Mixon scoring a try on his backside, that was impressive. They just looked at Alex Walmsley scoring again, continuing his form from last year try-wise. But Saints just started the season as they ended last year and the year before that as well.
I think the most probably impressive thing for St Helens would have been the form of people like Joel Thompson, because whilst he might not have taken any of the headlines, he looked like he'd played for them for years. That is a testament to the system that he's coming into. He made a really big contribution. He did a lot of the hard work that, the 1%ers that everybody talks about. He clearly is the consummate professional. But, you didn't notice that it wasn't maybe Dom Peyroux. He slotted in so effortlessly. I thought Johnny Lomax ran with the ball more maybe than he did last year, which again created havoc. And when all of your three quarters are scoring a try, and great to see Mark Percival back as well, it's ominous that in week one you can be that proficient. James Roby, how good did he look again? We don't say it enough because it's the norm. But yeah, they set a benchmark in week one. They know they can and will have to be better, and they clearly won't win every game. They'll have some weeks where they won't have everyone to call on that they would like to. But everybody who predicted them to win a three-peat looked like it was safe money after week one.
Does Ryan Hall's hat-trick for Hull KR, he says, playing the role of an internet troll, show up the difference in class between the NRL and Super League?
Well, I think me talked about this yesterday, and I think he's gone from one of the best teams, couldn't get a game for one of the best teams in the NRL, to obviously a starting winger with full respect to KR, one of the lower ranked teams in Super League. I think he's a good finisher, isn't he? He's an experienced player. I think some of the kicking for Jordan Abdul was brilliant that he feasted on. But yeah, I think it does probably illustrate the depth of talent and intensity between the two competitions. But I thought from Hull KR, I'm not a kid now, but how good were their shirts? They were very
bit too much black and white on there, isn't there? Though it's a bit of an odd colour choice. I mean, everyone's going turquoise this year, but the black and white.
Yeah,
I think on the Ryan Hall case, you play to him, don't you? The fact is that he was terribly injured in the NRL twice, so he was never able to really capitalise on the limited opportunities he got. And you look again at even what the Morris brothers are doing this year, and Daniel Tupou and Ikavalu. It was going to, at full fitness, it was going to be tough for him to break into that team, and he needed a run of games that he never got. But what he proved on Saturday, was that if you've got it, if you are a renowned finisher, if you've got this instinctive knowledge of where the try line is, you're a massive asset, provided teams play to you. And Holkar found a way to play to him, makes great yardage out of defence as well. But I think the interview that he gave afterwards also showed he's a very intelligent player, and someone who thinks deeply about the game. And all of these genuine sentiment about would have traded his 3 tries for just being able to hold on and gain a little victory on his debut. He would have taken that. Just says the right things, does the right things. I think he'll be a big influence around that camp. And he's a really good signing for Holkar on it. And no matter what your coverage is on his side of the field, give him an inch and he'll get you.
I hope he's steered in the right direction media-wise post-playing career, because he could be really good. The danger is a lot of people... There's some people who have obviously been given bad advice because they're not very good at their jobs. I'll leave it at that, because I'm not here to name names, and people can work out what I'm talking about and not talking about. We mentioned Holkar. Lee Centurion's another team expected to finish at the bottom end of the table. Also performed well in their return to Super League against Wigan, but Wigan's class, Wigan's quality showed as the game ticked on. I don't know, enthusiasm, whatever you want to say about Lee, but good performance from the Centurions, certainly closer than many would have expected, certainly the bookies.
Yeah, I think they did show a lot. I think, they were kicking themselves that they didn't hold on and win that game, because I think obviously it was a Wigan team, but you look at a lot of those league players, they wouldn't have played a game or hardly played a game in a year. So a really good effort. They started, like a bullet out of a gun, and that's the way they need to approach it. I think, if they can maintain that enthusiasm, that energy, and just be a little bit smarter on some occasions, they'll win enough games to stay up. I think whether it was one of the Bibby tries or the kick chase on Hardacre, and they'll look at that and just sort of, we've got to be better in that kick chase and that defence. But yeah, they certainly, the upset was on the cards. I think if you were Wigan, you thank your lucky stars, and also I think probably Thomas Luai, not that I'm trying to influence any disciplinary proceedings, because I don't have that power, nothing like it. I think he was probably lucky not to be sent from the field. Obviously, I'm biased against Wigan. I've always had an inherent hatred for Wigan, and I love them.
Is it just everyone from the Wigan borough? Because obviously you're still banned from Lee, I assume.
No, I love Lee, obviously. And I've always been anti-Wigan. I've always been pro-Toronto, pro St Helens, everyone else. Yeah.
I just wonder if Lee will look at that game and wonder if Joe Mellor had managed to gather a rolling ball and perhaps made it 24-0, whether Wigan would have come back from that. That just seemed like a turning point moment, that everything had gone Lee's way up to then. They great enthusiasm. I thought Ian Thornley was just a standout in the opening sort of 20 minutes of the game. But sometimes you just need a tiny bit of luck to go your way as well, even when you're ahead. And I genuinely don't know if Wigan would have come back from that deficit. Wigan did in the second half what Wigan do. Sam Powell tackled them back into the game. Harry Smith kicked them into the right parts of the field. And the likes of Zach Hardacre. And the big debate for Wigan, I think, is where do they play Hardacre? Because clearly Bevan French is back. But Hardacre just seems so much more comfortable and influential at that fullback role, and he made over 250 running metres. The position that he set up, the try that he scored, he was in many ways the difference between the teams, and seemed a lot more comfortable picking his opportunities to run from the back. I think John's right. Clearly, Lee haven't played enough games of that intensity that when it got to the sticky end, could hold it all together. But there was some encouraging signs. I just think they'll look back at that and go, 2 points at the very early stage of the season are massive psychologically, not just for you, but putting pressure on those around you. And you almost felt when the full-time whistle went that was 2 points that Lee had thrown away rather than 2 points that Wigan had managed to salvage. So we'll see. The shame for Lee is that, it couldn't be much harder. They've got Warrington in their second game back. To play Wigan and Warrington within a week, really, really difficult. So it'd be interesting to see how they back up against a team that've got literally everything to play for after the way they performed. So we shall see. But John Duffy looked like he was enjoying himself. Most of the league players looked like they were enjoying themselves. The halfbacks had the best hair combination of the opening round. And they've got some players with points to prove. Liam Hood looked really good. But I'm not sure their squad depth is there.
So, having been at the game, you'll have missed Sky showing Derek Bowman all the time on the telly celebrating, which, focus on their men in suits. That's what we want to see in the crowd. Not John Duffy's superb hair, as if he was in a 1990s band from Manchester. He could have been in spiral carpets or something, I don't know.
Got a feel for Jai Field as well. I mean, out for 5 months, that's just a horrendous, injured on debut, and you got a feel for him.
What about Nathan Peets? Because he's clearly going to be a marquee signing for Lee. Not here yet, because they've only just got him. He'll need to get his visa, and he'll need to train. Good signing. I mean, a hooker. We talked about Hooker early in the game, and not fully understanding why Darryl Clark was on the bench, because hookers are the fulcrum of everything under the new rules. Pete's a good signing.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, Phil, because I think I was speaking to someone at Lee, and I think they've already got 3 hookers in their squad, or at least 2. So it's sort of an unusual. They've got Hood and I think Matty Wildy and maybe one other. So it's sort of an unusual signing. I think Pete's a couple of years ago. He was probably in the top 8 hookers in the NRL, at least the top 10. He did play Origin, but let go by Justin Holbrook at the Gold Coast. It's hard to know how much he's been training in the off-season when you've not got a club. And obviously there was a couple of clubs in the NRL who needed hookers like Manly who didn't sign him. So you just kind of wonder, how he's going to perform. I think, if he's he's head to the right place and he wants to give it his all, then he could be a very good signing. But yeah, I think he arrives at some point this week, and I think they're going to throw him in the action relatively quickly. But if you look at how Leilani Latu did at Warrington, perhaps how Bryce Cartwright has done since leaving Gold Coast, another big Gold Coast signing that didn't work, you'd probably be a little bit concerned.
But you see, obviously, Sean Wayne there this weekend because he goes to all the games. Where he puts Zach Hardaker, assuming he picks him for the combined United Nations team opposition in that big mid-season, because obviously they're getting rid of mid-season internationals as well now.
Rich, just call that team the Exiles plus Regan Grace, because that's what it'll be. Exiles and Regan Grace. Of making that team, but hey, I'm probably wrong. I usually am.
It's another shirt they can sell, though. I'm just hoping this gets on. They make a documentary about it, and I'll get on that one as well. Zach Hardaker went and won for England, possibly. It's not an official Test match because they're not a real country. But neither's England.
I'd have to say that he's going to have to go some to displace Sam Tompkins, because Tompkins is a Wayne type of player. But I thought. For all the time that he was on for Catalan, again, the most influential player on the field. I think we do need to hope and praise Catalan, the young French guys coming through. And Matthew Laguerre had a fantastic introduction to Super League, and clearly Arthur Morg's break at the end set up the position for James Maloney's field goal. There's some, couple of really good, exciting French players there who I hope get a lot of game time. I don't know if they will, but Tompkins again was absolute class when he was on, and I thought he refereed the game magnificently as well.
I think if if Jake Connor can perform at fullback, and obviously working with Brett Hodgson, who was a very, very good fullback in his day, if he can play consistently at fullback, I think he'll be knocking on the door for that England jumper as well.
It's great to have choice. I mean, for too often the size picked itself. So competition for places is excellent. We need that in the centres. A bit like there, but you'd have to say on even what we've seen this weekend that Tommy Makinson and Tom Johnson would be an absolutely sensational wing pairing.
Leeds Rhinos, who it's amazing that they could even get on the field with having no players because they're all injured according to the telly. That's what all the Wakefield fans were telling me. Why didn't they mention Max Jarrett was injured and Kyle Wood? If Kyle Wood had played, Wakefield would have won that one. Not to take anything away from young Batchelor, who was superb, but it's just a different thing. But Wakefield should have won. We didn't win. Bloody Leeds. The
interesting thing about Wakefield, though, I thought, was Jacob Miller looked freed up. That Mason Lino will need a bit more time to get all the calls, but he actually ran the game, and Miller looked far more destructive. Just to go back to a friend of ours who used to say, you need one with one who does the organising and one who decides when he's going to play. Wakefield looked like they had the beginnings of that. That was a far more influential Jacob Miller performance than we saw from most of last year. That was encouraging.
Yeah, as much as I'm a Danny Brough fan, and I liked his attitude, it probably was the wrong time to bring him back. But
well, again, you go back to what we discussed at the very beginning. It looks as though Gareth Widdop and Blake Austin need a ball each, whereas the Wakefield combination looked like they even though they hadn't been together for very long, your job is to get us to the right part of the field. My job is to capitalise on that, and it seems to work. So a lot of the teams that won this weekend had a better balance in the halves. Even Gareth O'Brien and Jake Truman when they started for Cass, and clearly Richardson will come into that mix when his hands healed. They got the balance between what they were trying to do right. Even Mikey Lewis and Jordan Abdul was a partnership that, when it fired, was starting to work because they each knew the role that they should have been taking.
I think what we're getting out of this is 11 teams can come out of this weekend, if not happy with the result, happy that they showed enough in their performance to be happy after week one of Super League. I tweeted on Saturday afternoon after he scored his first try that he should be a household name in the way Martin Afire was. And I completely understand that. If we say Afire's pomp was 92 or whatever, and Wigan's pomp was 92, that the whole sporting world has changed since then. And, no one can name a netball player or women's footballer in 1992, and now their profile is much higher and ours is much lower for many and various reasons. But he should be. And Tommy Makinson should. Someone tweeted me, said, Tommy Johnson's overrated. Well, all right, fair enough. Tommy Makinson, we'll put him up there. It doesn't matter if they're overrated or not. It doesn't matter if Tom Johnson does, to the world outside, it doesn't matter if Tom Johnston or Niall Evans or whoever is rubbish apart from when they score a spectacular try, because that's all we're selling them on. Martin Afire is not in the Rugby League Hall of Fame for his defence, is he? I'm not saying he couldn't tackle or anything, but he's not. That's not what he's in the Hall of Fame for. That's not what his job was.
He didn't need to tackle with the likes of G. Miles and Dean Bell inside him, and that you play to his strengths, don't you? I think the thing that we said about Tom Johnson yesterday when we were having a chat between matches was we need to provide the media in its widest sense with more information as to why his feats were so exceptional. Stories you can build around the fact that he scored 2 absolutely sensational tries. Things like, we pay Opta for the stats for every game. I mean, we don't, clearly. We don't pay anything. But Super League pay for a stats service. Those stats are available. What we need are those stats on social media the minute a game is finished, or even if it's possible. If you know how fast Tom Johnson's run to get that try, if you know that as well as his 2 tries he made 256 metres, and let's say that's the most a Wakefield winger's made for 20 years. I don't. The stats are there to make stories. If I don't know, Sam Powell has made 84 tackles in a game and it's a new record, we don't know about that sort of stuff soon enough. And if you're going to build the profile and personality of the players as opposed to the suits, it's more than just 2 days later saying, here's a couple of great tries from Tom Johnson. We have to. I mean, John was looking for some stats from the game, the day or 2 days before on Sunday when we were watching those games, and they still weren't up on the website. We just need to be a bit smarter about the information we've got and the stories we can tell on the back of that information. In NFL, you break wind and somebody can tell you the velocity of it as it happens.
I've said before, if you go onto the Major League Baseball website, they produce stats for every single game. And I'm talking about 10, 15 pages worth of stats. And Americans love stats. But they do keep records of the record of wins and losses in a certain kit or in a stadium or against this pitcher. If the information's there, we should use it because people love stats today. People love to compare. We all love it, don't they, when a rugby union tweet comes out saying he made one tackle in the game and made an average of 0.4 metres per carry, despite the fact the games are completely different. And we may as well be comparing apples and oranges. But we love that because we can go, you're crap. And our man's good, look at this. You're right, we do need ways of selling things to people. I mean, I've got Sky Sports News on TV and they've just shown Tom Johnson's try and Stevie Ward talking about it. But if you're not on social media, when will you see that? Or watching Sky Sports News? The Super League highlights are on at 1:45 in the morning. I don't actually see the point of that programme being on at 1:45 in the morning because no one's going to watch it.
Yeah, so but you're not an insomniac.
No.
So leave it for those of us who are. I'm interested to know from John. John writes for national papers, so clearly having an angle to get more stories in is what you need to go to them with it. If you could have gone with the Tom Johnson as just, would have won the Olympic 100 metres in, I don't know, in London in 2012 with the speed that he went down the wing. Does that make it easier or harder to sell it to a newspaper? Is that something that we're missing out on? Or am I barking up a tree that is completely irrelevant, which wouldn't be the first time?
I think you're right, Phil. I think you need to kind of come with an extra angle or an extra hook because kind of just the generic, he's a winger and he scores tries doesn't cut it when it comes to rugby league. It might cut it for football, but or some other sports. But for rugby league, from a national point of view, you need to have a different hook, a different look at it. I know when I did a story on John Thompson, the start of the year when he joined St Helens, but it wasn't about NRL second row at joined St Helens. It was Joel Thompson who speaks out about Indigenous issues and works with men, works with kids who have been in trouble, from Indigenous backgrounds, and talking about mental well-being and trying to help other people and his own story. So that was the hook of the angle. It wasn't that he's a good tackler and he's got great line speed and he's dependable. That we've definitely got to look at different ways to try and get publicity because the current ways, apart from the rusted-on rugby league fans who would be listening to this show, they're not sort of attracting a wider audience. So I think something like Tom Johnson, and I think probably the highlights were on social media, but you need to get those highlights out free and as quickly as possible and keep pushing them because, anyone who's what he did in that game would just be like, wow, this kid's quick, he's rapid, he's exciting, and that's what you like to see. You like to see players in full flight taking on defenders, and you want to see spectacular tries.
By the same token, the biggest physical confrontation of the weekend was probably Iggy Parsi at the start of the second half of the St Helens Salford game. Fortunately, no major injuries. But if we could have said the equivalent G-force of that collision would have been, 30 mile an hour in a car or whatever, that it's just a different way of selling. And that clip should have been readily available for people to see. If your USP is these guys have no fear, these guys are, the ultimate sporting warriors and gladiators. Here's a clip of two guys going head to head at the start of the second half, and whilst one of them had to go off, the combined G-force was, enough to put a man in space. It's how you sell it, isn't it? I'm not sure we do that enough.
It's weird how things go viral. Remember the Joe Westerman Hull FC thing a few years, whacking his knee back into place, which to any normal human being, you're just like completely shocked and stunned at that. I'm pretty sure that went around the world and people were just thinking, God, this bloke's hard. So it's little quirky things like that, amazing things like that. And watching the old games last week, Terry O'Connor getting trampled in the face by Jason Stevens, and that not even being a penalty in the year 2001, which, is probably the most blatant red card you ever see, but it gets people talking, So, I think there's probably an avenue we can... In each game, there are talking points, good and bad, and we should probably not shy away from talking about them, be a bit more grown up and have discussions.
I would be concerned if any rugby league players were faster than those involved in the 1988 Olympic final, which is the dirtiest race in history. But I think there's a great documentary about that. But I always feel a bit sorry for Ben Johnson because you're like, I know he cheated and all that, but he ain't the only one. He ain't the only one. Something you mentioned on your show with Steve on Friday, John, was access to players, and this concerns me because every Tom, Dick, and Harry, including us, have a podcast these days, and you see players pitch up on these podcasts, which without wanting to sound like we're the best thing ever. We're not. No. But more people listen to this podcast. You can see the numbers. You can check them out on Facebook or whatever. And, professional players are wasting their time speaking to podcasts with no listeners. I remember at the Hall of Fame dinner when Tommy Makinson was awarded the Golden Boot, and I asked the media people, could I get a one-on-one with Tommy Makinson for Talk Sport? No. And then I walked out of the room and he's doing an interview with a TV programme that nobody watched. And I'm sure they didn't go through the same channels. I'm sure they just grabbed him, What's access like for you trying to get stories into a national newspaper, which is obviously going to be read by more than just people in the rugby league bubble like what we live in?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to get stories in regardless. I think there's less and less coverage in nationals apart from a couple of examples. And, to be honest, a lot of it's sort of buried in, the backs of papers or the middle sections of papers. So it is very hard. I think it's a difficult one because some clubs and some individuals are really good with access and they go out of their way. There are some fantastic examples, and probably overall access in rugby league is better than, say, football, which I also. But in saying that, there's far too many examples where access isn't great or where it can be improved, and I think there needs to be a mentality shift to something more like boxing, where it's just like almost as many interviews as possible you can do, and a lot of them will just be 5 minutes here on the phone or 10 minutes here on the phone, so it's not really that taxing. But I know there's lots of players and coaches that I've tried to reach out to who I've either agreed to interviews and that hasn't happened, or you've had to wait several weeks, or young players, they don't want young players to do certain media, and I can understand that, but I think there's definitely a cautious approach. But we're not probably in a position of strength, like, say, the Premier League, where you only have to do your 3 interviews a week and then you're done, because it's the Premier League. I think we need to be trying to get as much media coverage in as many formats as possible. But yeah, that's just my view. Obviously, as a journalist, I'm a bit biased when it comes to the subject.
We'll get more media coverage one day that people want, and then they'll still moan about it because no one's ever happy.
I think that there is evidence of the governing bodies trying to do that. With the Women's Super League being on Twitch, I think is a real innovation, and it's a younger audience. It's one that doesn't have any preconceptions of what they're watching, and we know from following the Women's Super League from when it started, they're going to be impressed by what they see, and that's great. And we don't want to detract from anything that clubs or the players themselves are doing, because I think they are genuinely available virtually all of the time. They see the value of it. I just think we need to find ways of exploiting their accessibility more than we do. And that is why I mentioned the stats, because I think you've got to back that up with something. If you can say, Tom Johnson average speed for his first try was the equivalent of 75 miles an hour, then, which newspaper who's never heard of Tom Johnson wouldn't want to at least be a little bit intrigued by that and want to know a bit more? And is this the fastest man in sport? Should the Great Britain Olympic team be trying to find out? However you want to spin it, we've got to actually make these stories more available and match the players, because I find that the players are absolutely fantastic. Can't do enough. And it's the job of the sport to get some background stories.
You could have a future in bobsleigh. Could be one of those athletes who switches to bobsleigh, who pushes the thing down because he's fast. It could be. We should get him into the next Winter Olympics. That should be how we can capitalise on Tom Johnson. Just as long as he doesn't sign for Leeds or something, because that'd be terrible. He says, completely biased. Challenge Cup wise, Featherstone beat Batley 30-22. I didn't watch that. I did watch London and York. That game was not very good. 2-0 at half time, and it's not as if it was defensive on top. There's a lot of mistakes in that one. But it's early in the season,
Was it as bad as Brisbane versus the Bulldogs?
Second half was good of that game.
I'm going to give London York the benefit of the doubt, being that it's only their second game, and they're not paid as much as Brisbane and the Bulldogs.
Some people saying the Brisbane Bulldogs game was the worst game in the history of rugby league. So I just have said it.
I'm sure I've seen worse games between Wakefield and Huddersfield. I'm sure I have. Swinton beat Oldham. That was an entertaining clash. And Widnes beat Whitehaven 34-10, which I think everyone would have expected by the end, and it was the result you'd expect by the end. The Challenge draw is out. Excitedly, of course, it's Saints versus Leeds on the telly, a virtual charity shield, if you will. I say on the telly, they haven't announced the TV games yet. Catalans Wakefield, Fev Hull, so a repeat of that game with all the cards from a few years ago. Hull KR Cass, Lee Huddersfield, Salford Widnes, Swinton Warrington, and York versus Wigan. The draw made late this morning, so everyone could moan that it was late, because Monday morning got to think, oh no, I've taken a break at work to watch the Challenge Cup draw. Now it's not on. No.
But you see, again, talking of ways of building something up, you just mentioned a really interesting point about the last time Fev and Hull met in a cup tie. There were a lot of cards. Now, I would have thought a campaign would have started from the minute that draw was made to say, right, these two teams need to be building some propaganda about, can't wait to play you again because we've got a bit of unfinished. But a bit like boxing. John was just saying, what sells boxing? It's before the game, before the bout, you're almost mandated to trash talk your opponent. But it gets people buying into the broadcast, doesn't it? It's box office, literally. You pay for it, and that's what it becomes. Well, this was an ideal opportunity this afternoon to talk to Featherstone and Hull and say, right, we want to ratchet this up a little bit. We want you to say what you intend to do, and how good would that be? We need to make it easier to cover the sport.
I don't think Missy Talapapa's is playing for Featherstone anymore, but hopefully doesn't try and kill or take the heads off any of the OFC players like that. Anyway.
Jake Connor's still there, though, to wind up everyone. So that's that is the good news.
Well, they got Reynolds as well. That's a lot of sledging, a lot of niggles. You gotta love it.
Jake the Snake, Featherstone Hull at the Millennium Stadium, of course, just to confuse everyone. In that third
Wales.
In Wales, yeah, they've moved it to Wales.
No, I think York quite an interesting tie because I think York have built a very good, strong team for this year. A lot of Super League experience. started well, beating London, beating Sheffield, and were, pretty decent against Hull. So that could be quite an interesting encounter.
And those championship sides, of course, are one game away from Wembley, regardless, because they'll be in the 1895 draw, which will be made at some point in the future. So excitement there. Hopefully we'll be at Wembley. Oliver Dowden on the telly talking about his roadmap Mr. Johnson's roadmap this morning.
Yeah, they're talking about maybe Wembley being half full if things go to plan, which would be.
But the Catalans could be there, then that'd be all right.
York will be ruining the fact that clearly they can't have a crowd in their beautiful new stadium against Wigan. I think that probably would have been the first near sellout. But if I'm right, isn't it a double header on the BBC on the with this round of the draw? And they're talking about maybe having it at the same venue. So, assuming that St Helens and Leeds is the game that they pick, which other team is going to give up home advantage to play at St Helens if it is a double header?
Catalans? No, probably they wouldn't, would they?
Just throwing that in the mix.
Interesting times.
See, again,
completely, yeah.
If it was Featherstone and Hull, now again goes back to you build it up now. You don't wait until the game's about to happen. That would be a fantastic match to have on before Saints and Leeds, with a load of ill feeling attached to it, whether it's real or not.
You've also you've got a former Hull KR player coaching Featherstone, presumably with some hatred of the black and white. So we'll just get him to tell us all how much he hates LFC.
Just make sure some of the players stay off social media in the build-up and don't get into any more trouble.
Phil, can you tell us what's happening in America? Not with Joe Biden, but in American Rugby League, in the return of the Wolfpack. Phil, you're a man in the know. I'm certainly not. What's happening?
I'm not sure anybody knows at the moment. I think whatever is going on is not officially sanctioned. So I think we can say that there is a really interesting trend at the moment in people wanting to do things outside of the given organisations. So I think the fact that we don't fully know who is behind it or what they're planning, and there's countdown clocks for about 6 clubs who may well be playing in what we've heard could be a semi-professional competition in America after the existing USARL season has finished, is intriguing. But the only thing I think we have heard that hasn't been corroborated is that some of the financial backers who were behind the New York bid to be a semi-professional team are keen to promote rugby league in and around that northern edge of America and into perhaps a couple of Canadian teams who could well be a reincarnated Wolfpack and Ottawa if, again, their passage in is being slightly delayed because of all the restrictions on COVID. And if there are new backers out there and they do want to set up a competition, then they should be encouraged. But is it another example of entrepreneurs coming forward and just wanting to see their version of a sport in a country rather than working with the governing bodies that currently exist? Is that a good or a bad thing? I guess we'll know more by the 1st of April when they promised an announcement. Would be interesting if they were going to be semi-professional, who would play for them? Because clearly they would need to supplement the Indigenous talent that's playing in the domestic leagues at the moment. And if they have got the backing of corporate sponsors behind them, then the players who become vulnerable are championship players over here, because they are not paid a lot of money. They could easily be enticed over the pond for a relatively short semi-professional circuit. A lot up for grabs. Be very interesting to see who is behind it, what backing they've got, and what the ultimate end game is. Extend this into what happens if there isn't enough money from Sky over the next 3 to 5 years, not the 2 immediate years that we've got coming up in a deal that's yet to be announced. And ambitious clubs don't want to be held back, and they're looking to be part of something wider, and that's stymied by what's happening in the domestic competition over here. You almost can see the germination of another rebel breakaway somewhere down the line if there is provenance behind the finance. And that's the bit that I don't think any of us know at the moment, unless Steve Maskell's going to tell us something tonight in his much publicised more breaking news from Mascord Towers.
I believe he's going to write a story tonight. I have no idea what's in it because I would mention it. But yeah, he did say he's going to write more about it tonight. I believe he seems to know some things. All I seem to know is that rumoured that Eric Perez is involved and Ricky Wilby, the New York bid leader, is involved. But that's about all I know.
Well, what about France, who've made a really interesting coaching appointment today by bringing Sean Long in to work alongside the likes of Trent Robinson? Are we seeing a resurgence of the French national team? And we need to be excited about that if we look at the talent on the field that performed so creditably for the Dragons, and a coaching team that could have the same kind of impact that Sean Edwards has had in France, although I gather they didn't win the Six Nations, although...
I don't want to play devil's advocate, Phil, but if you look at how France performed at the last World Cup, has the Jason Battieri case ever been resolved?
Well, I think the gentleman against who the case was has now stepped aside, so it probably isn't much of a case anymore. But there needs to be, and there seems to be, and there will be under Trent Robinson's Director of Rugby Guidance, there'll be a greater unity. There'll be a more desire for the Dragons to be releasing players. The players themselves will want to play under him again. I think he's a real unifying force. If they can start playing some attractive rugby with Laurent Freycinou and Sean Long at the helm, then it could be an exciting period of rugby. Do we now need to nail in fixtures regularly between England and France? Ideally in France to make them testing in the first instance. And have those on board.
I was just going to say, I don't think it's attractive rugby they need to play. They need to play winning rugby. They actually need to win some games. I think that's the problem. And the unity, as you mentioned, there's been massive issues behind the scenes. They never seem to have a full-strength team. Even the Nines, which was probably the last, apart from the GB Tour, the World Cup Nines in Sydney, even then they didn't have, a full strength, and they never seem to have the best 17 available on the park for whatever reason. So, if they can actually get their best team out there, and they are unified and they've got a good coach, because I think that, that's been issues, and if Trent Robinson, I don't know how much he's going to be involved, but, if he's running the show and Sean Long's there, then that is a positive, because I think we saw in the last World Cup, and I remember John Keir saying this at one point after Wales had been beaten by 50 or 40, the gap between the Southern Hemisphere and the Northern Hemisphere was growing. And you look at Tonga, Samoa, Fiji, the amount of the players that they can, draw on are all kind of top NRL players. So it's going to be interesting in the World Cup this year where we see those players are at. Because if you're a League One player and you're coming up against, Justin Olam or Happy Coruscant, it's not really a fair fight, is it?
I just think that France have always been their most difficult to beat and have got the greatest number of their top line players available when they've played at home. And we've also seen that there is a real appetite amongst French crowds for international rugby league. So that even at the last World Cup in 2013, when we had a group in France, some of the highest crowds in the group games were France playing in Avignon, and there is a feel, I think, under Luc Lacoste, who's their new president, that he does want to spread the game. So, if you did take an international to the facilities that they've got at Toulouse, even if you took an England-France game to Paris, you've actually got something sellable. And I just think Robinson is the key to all this, because clearly Catalan were at their very best under him, a dual speaker, understands the culture. But if they've got the flamboyance of a Long working alongside him, they've got Freysin, who, again, very well respected amongst Bernard Gouache and people like that, who need to buy into all of this to get those players released. I'd just love to see, if we're going to lose the mid-season international, the first... I think... to get an extra week at the end of the season for internationals. I'd love there to be, put in for the next 3 years. England will definitely play in France, between now and the next World Cup.
We need to get some French players in the NRL, along with the young English ones. Get them all over there, get them some experience. Although, alongside the Catalans bringing through French players, we saw London yesterday. I know they lost to York, but plenty of academy products in their squad as well, which is good to see for the development of the game outside of the north of England and such. I'm trying to think of what else has gone on off. I think we've pretty much done everything on the field. Off the field, we've seen the RFL's new tackle it 13 seconds thing, which confused people because they thought that means you can't do anything out of people. At least we didn't have people on social media moaning about that this weekend, which was good.
It's probably the best compromise that you can come up with. Everybody entered into what it stands for. I think the message was clear. And some knelt, some stood up, some put their hand across their heart, but everybody did something. There was a general feel that it was all accepted, and a message that needs to be sold. I think the other thing we probably should mention is this round of Super League is dedicated to Mossy Massoy, and his foundation that he's just set up. And if you haven't seen the interview he did on Sky, then again, it brings everything home about what we're asking of these people and what they do for us and what we ask of them. And if we can support it in some way by buying a virtual ticket to the games this week, then we should. It seemed to work. I think we got to the point where it was being undermined, and there seems to be 13 seconds seems to at least have some relevance and reference to rugby league. So it worked.
Nigel
Wood, he's back. Yeah, you're right. I'm still in shock. I can't believe it.
Again, I'm going to ask John about this because, again, news value. If you've got nothing to hide, and if you want to be brash and confident about what you're doing and why you're doing it, you announce that at a time where you'll get publicity for it. You don't announce it at 5:30 on a Friday without a formal press release, and that is it looks like you're burying bad news. Should Bradford have been a lot more upfront about what they were doing? I mean, it's not come as a surprise, and as a major shareholder in the club, why shouldn't he become chairman? Why shouldn't he appoint whoever he wants? And if that's Adam Fogarty, you know that there is a certain section of the population that are going to deride that decision. And it may well turn out to be either a great thing for the Bulls or something they will regret down the line. But either way, if you're constantly trying to go under the radar, people will be suspicious of your motives. Didn't they have to come out and say on a Thursday morning, this is what we're doing, this is why we're doing it, here's Nigel for an interview?
Yeah, I think that probably would have been the smartest strategy personally. I think, I could be wrong here, but wasn't there denials a while back that he was involved or that he was, maybe by Mark Sawyer on the record? As I said, I could be wrong in a publication. So to kind of make denials and then to kind of try and slip out the announcement on social media. And also even announcing on social media, some of the replies were, they were amusing. And I didn't see it first because obviously I was at the Super League game and I was focused on that. But yeah, it's not really advisable, is it? I think if you've got nothing to hide, then come out at a normal time and put Nigel up for interview. But I think as you rightly said, Phil, there is a section of the rugby league community, rightly or wrongly, and I would say there's a lot of right at it, who is, is cynical, perhaps is the right word, about the appointment and his involvement after running the RFL and what's happening to Oddsall and going back to Oddsall and the situation with the rent, and there's a lot of questions there which have never been answered. We didn't get an independent inquiry into the handling of the Bulls, the numerous administrations by the RFL, did we? That was denied. There's always going to be questions, because I don't think that's ever been properly articulated or explained. That's kind of where the situation lies. And as you said, it could be a very good thing for the Bulls, for their fans, Nigel, being involved.
Well, he clearly cares about the club and lives in the city. I think, in some respects, they've got away very lightly with having the chairman of another club acting as their chief executive. And I just think...
Eric Perez ran the club as well.
But which again would not happen, I don't think, in any other sport. So I just think that you have to brazen it out. Once you've done things like that, you've either got something to hide or you haven't. And if you haven't, and you want to wipe a slate clean, go out and tell people what you're doing. Don't ever. We spoke quite a lot on this podcast about how do we get more publicity for the sport. You do not do it by sneaking something out at 5:30 on a Friday and then hoping that either people won't complain too much, or perhaps you can get on your business without ever being questioned about it. It's a story. It would have made some national newspapers if it had been handled a little bit differently.
Yeah, back to transparency and accountability, doesn't it? And that's what a lot of people want to see more of in a lot of areas, not just that Bradford Nigel section, but in a lot of areas of the game and the administration of the game. And goes back to the whole point about you don't want to talk about men in suits, which we keep hearing that nonsense message. No offence, once in your magazine, Phil. If the game wasn't in a mess off the field, we wouldn't be writing about it. We wouldn't be talking about it. If the TV deal was 50% higher, it wouldn't garner so much, negative publicity, would it? But you have to report on what's happening, and you can't
100%.
stick your head in the sand and just your fingers in the ears and go la 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 la. It's just not. It's not realistic.
I was trying to think of other examples of teams or clubs in sports being owned by the same person. The only one I could think of off the top of my head was when Robert Maxwell owned Oxford and his sons owned Reading.
Oh, was it Reading?
Yeah, they were going to merge with the Thames Valley Royals, but it obviously never happened. And whatever happened to Robert Maxwell? No one knows. It's a mystery. The problem with the men in suits line is, if you're reporting on the sport and you're moaning about the men in suits, you don't have to report on them if you don't want to. Because obviously if you don't and it's a story, then more fool you. But if you're reporting on the sport and you decide what you do and don't report on, and you bemoan the fact that everything's about some blokes in suits and not the men, women who are playing the game, then you can make that choice if you want to. You don't have to. Anyway,
I think the other thing is it's disingenuous slightly for a man in suit giving a statement saying don't report the men in suits.
Here's the number.
Ken Davies here, and he's here to run. I don't know why Huddersfield have felt the need to install a chairman, by the way, because it's not as if he's a long-term appointment in charge of Super League. I know he's not replacing Robert Elson, is he? He's just like a figurehead leader. He's a puppet, I understand, for Gary Hetherington and Eamon McManus to take control of Super League and put them back in the RFL. That's what I read earlier. This is a decision which apparently has divided Super League again.
I think he's an honest broker, isn't he? He's a face saver. He will come up with, and he kept stressing it, it's a realignment. It's not reunited. But he will come up with the Davy plan so that everybody saves face on what has happened. And I suspect it will be the commercial arm of whatever the governing body is called after all of this, and it will be, people whose sole job is to sell and promote Super League. Because I think one of the other things that was obvious when the split came, apart from the politics behind it and trying to change the personnel at Red Hall, which was the coup element of it, there were people there that worked in marketing and media who were given an almost impossible task, because without 5 times the number of people in that department, they were expected to do every competition. So, the minute the Challenge Cup final finished, they were selling tickets for the Grand Final. The minute the Grand Final finished, they were selling tickets for the Internationals. And it's too much for one body of people to do all of that. So I think the feeling was the Super League brought the money in. They deserve the bulk of the resource. So I think you'll find a commercial side that is still solely Super League related, but has the ability to sell the game as a whole package. So if you come in as a sponsor, you don't have to deal with 3 different people. You can go to one, and there will be some people who are solely aligned to selling Super League, but those same people, that department, will also be able to sell you a sponsorship or a corporate package at an England game or whatever it might be. So Ken will be the guy that brings all that together. But yeah, clearly what started as 11 people speaking out and one in favour has changed. Whether Ken's a puppet at the age he is and the wealth and experience he has behind him, I'm not sure. I think clearly he has been brought in to manage what is a difficult situation to get a degree of unity.
You hope by now, having done this show for so long, people would understand my role on this, but I don't think they do sometimes. But we'll see. Is there any other news we need to talk about that I've completely forgotten about? Apart from the government giving us more money, which is nice of them, but I think we have to give it back, which is not good. If we could just keep it, and we wouldn't waste it on third-rate Aussies, would we? Playing in League One or something? No, we wouldn't do that. I don't think it's any. There's no more news, is there? We've actually talked about Rugby League. We're not doing predictions because we get them wrong. I was so confident on Huddersfield at the weekend. I was like, oh, Huddersfield, yeah, they'll be all right. I mean, obviously I didn't know Aidan Season was going to be injured, but never mind. So there's always next week. This week's fixture in Super League: Wigan, Wakefield, and Hull. KR versus Saints on Thursday. Good Friday: Warrington, Lee, and Leeds versus Castleford. And Saturday, Salford, Hull, and Huddersfield, Catalans. And there's obviously the championship fixtures sprinkled throughout the weekend as well, which you can all watch in our league if you pay for them. So it keeps some people busy over the weekend anyway, at least, which is good news.
York Toulouse looks like a great game in the championship.
That's a game you'd like to see. Well, I would say free because I'm right, but yeah, that's a game you'd like to see on some sort of streaming device. Yeah,
that is one I'd put on the Sportsman, who again seem to have a younger audience and seem to be very much behind promoting rugby league. So that is a game I would say, yeah, ideally we'd like to charge you a ticket for, but we'll just show how good the championship is by sticking it in front of, what have they got, 100,000 Twitter followers? So,
I mean, everyone knows who is the Sportsman, don't they? Everyone's worked out who they are. And they also sponsor the Challenge Cup and they sponsor the Championship. So it would make sense, perhaps down the line, that they could show a game from the Championship on there. It would be a good advert for the Championship. I think this is the thing with that Twitch deal for the Women's Super League. It's a good platform to be on because it's a different audience. It's a younger audience. But during lockdown, a lot of different people have now taken to Twitch and not just use it as a platform for sharing them playing video games to make me sound like a high court judge, but also do comedy on there and do various different things now. People are using it as a different platform, and we can hopefully find a different audience on there with the Women's Super League. But I also hope that we can also put together some kind of highlight show that's on YouTube or whatever, and is given to people to be able to see a new selection of stars. Perhaps.
Well, netball certainly seems to be working on YouTube.
If you put together highlights and you accentuate the positives and hide any negatives, then we've got something. Fingers crossed. I'm looking forward to the season starting in a few weeks, even though my team isn't on for the first week. What's going on? I wonder what game they'll show that first week. I would probably pick Castlewood versus Featherstone. Or Bradford St Helens. No, I'd pick Casfev. I don't know if Castlewood have appointed a coach yet. So that would be interesting.
Adam Cuthbertson.
He's too busy now. Marauding around that 4G pitch in London yesterday, Rosslyn Park. Is that Hugh? What's his name used to play for? Martin Afire, to mention him again. Before he became a professional.
Yep. Before he was famous.
Yeah. Because he, of course, famously, for Rosslyn Park, played in the Middlesex Sevens, which is where they invented the String Low Sweet Chariot thing. Or as everyone else knows, that's a complete load of revisionist history. And we all know the real story behind that chant. But, hey. Times have changed. That kind of thing never happens anymore. On the assumption that that is all the news, because I can't think of anything else. What are you writing about this week, John? What secret stories can I expect to be appearing in my inbox?
I think
I love the chicken. The chicken wing is always the highlight of the week for me. I know that.
There is. I think there will be a result on the investigation into a certain allegedly racist comment from a certain player.
This is the good news, by the way. There's no Super League disciplinary this week. Everyone's got off. So all the match disciplinary committee have got to do is sort out the testicle grabbing in the Challenge Cup from a week ago. So good to see that's made it into 2021.
How did Thomas Little get off?
I've not read the notes because we were on air, but yes, no one will be up before the beak this week.
I think it's a worry when a player dives at the back of the knees of an opponent without using his arms. I think that's an issue that kind of needs to be looked at in the game personally. But of course, I'll be accused of bias and.
You hate Wigan, yeah. Anti-Wigan, anti-New Zealanders.
Yeah. I'm not too crashed on South Africans either, but I suppose that's different.
Well, I mean, as Spitting Image once said, I've never met a nice South African, which is untrue. But
No.
I think we may find that the television deal is finally announced this week, and
much hand wringing to come after that. Brilliant.
And there will be some international stories tomorrow because Troy Grant, who is the new chairman of the IRL, will be formally unveiled. So, look out for that.
Yes, Troy Grant, Phil. Is he the ex-Conservative politician, Troy Grant, I believe, as well?
Yeah, I think taking over from Greg Barclay, who decided cricket was his bag rather than rugby league.
Well, is he technically taking over from Nigel Wood, though, as well?
No, Danica Kazanjian took over from Nigel Wood in that they renamed his position to Secretary General rather than Chief Executive. So, no, it's Chairman of the Board rather than CEO.
Can we bring back that?
United Nations now. Maybe we could have got Boutros Ghali.
Boutros Ghali. Can we bring that title for the RFL? Because obviously I'll go through these old programmes, and that was David Oxley's old job title. Can we rename Ralph Rimmer the Secretary General of the Rugby Football League?
The Commissar.
Junior Vice President, I think, is the supreme title.
No, because the president, Rugby League is run by Gary Hetherington from Headingley. We know that. Yeah. Phil's nodding, so it must be true.
The SAR. The only other story which is good news as well is Community Rugby League is back. Some stipulations on how it comes back, but clubs this week will be getting together and starting to train again, and that's great. That really is important. And I know that was the message stressed by Oliver Dowden today in Warrington, but clearly there are a lot of people who've not been able to put foot on a rugby pitch for far too long, who will get back with their mates, especially at junior levels, and that can only be good. And let's hope there's no need to postpone any of that anymore.
It was good to see Courtney Hill on the TV this week, and everyone going, John, thanks for joining us. I'm sure you'll be back again soon. What's the Patreon address? What's it called so we can find it?
It is called rugbyleague.com long reads. So go to Patreon or Google that and sign up for your rugby league journalistic needs. Phil,
the latest 4020 is still out. It is here. I'm hoping then, if you're excited about stats, that the cover of the next one will have Tom Johnston mocked up as Carol Vorderman doing the numbers board on Countdown. Possibly. When do I need to finish my column for, Phil? That's the big question.
Middle of next week, latest.
Well, that's okay because I've written loads of words already, so that's good. We'll be back next week with more to talk about in the world of rugby league. Some more guests, whoever they are, and getting excited about the next round of the Challenge Cup. I think that's next week. Now you can go outside. You don't have to. Stay safe and all that.
Enjoy your Easter eggs. We certainly do.